Yes, so the question name everything we are something right now, but that something right now, trying to let's sneak into this thing without this and that mother noticing. Certainly, by the friend is right now as well. Like, certainly, customer would be totally hiding from things in that bag that customer is, for example. This is certainly my friend version. But like, I'm wondering that what customer might have seen that underneath that waste bin as like something so my when that you would be that the dead body of that Dustin's that and mother of that favorite best cat that name of the brain but so that this would be what like Dustin is right now hiding in his like sack right now in the jail it's the dead body of that cat it's certainly made it right so like I'm going like Dustin would be like like I'm going like the reason would be definitely because like I'm maybe it would be because of like mother might be like totally obsessed with like that cat would be like so extremely precious to that Dustin's mother. So Dustin's mother simply won't be able to like would say Dustin would be totally fearing like the bottle that her mother totally going crazy and panicking if she found out that her favorite pet cat has died. It's definitely gonna be but like, that might be the reason for like Dustin right now. Most likely in his bag would be like containing that body of like, the cat and Dustin trying to like sneak into his home and to that doctor might want to like inspect like the body of the cat to see that what had actually happened to the cat. But even the brain, especially because of like basically when a doctor had just now even showed up towards like this home that they did had visibly had seen like the waist bin like visibly shaking right before the things might have seen that dead body of like the cat beneath on the bottom of that waste bin. So like I was wondering like, what might have happened would be like it might have definitely been Will, certainly one of the friends, but like Will might have Will might have totally that cat pet of like a six mother might have entered that and I was wondering like maybe that doesn't like at the home like pumpkin might be that part often like doesn't mother might like pumpkin head or something like that. So like the last time like the way fit at like the home like basically the thing was like shown shaking that maybe it might have been like Will himself in like the middle of the night while being controlled by the monster from the same will like they believe maybe even creating portal and basically showing up to that from beneath like the waste bin that maybe will possibly having that made the portal and from like the parallel world that maybe like will might have like in the middle of the night will might have while being controlled by the monster will might be casually like moving from creating portals and moving from the real world into the parallel world and uh, to and from like the real world and the bad world over like about that and so like I'm doing like the last time like initially when like the racing outside of like the things home and I think was like don't taking or something like that back then like it might have been like just in like that might back then it might have been that will while being controlled by like the monster like really eating all the fun things that might have been like on stage that race game especially when like with support that or like the pumpkin race that might have ended up in like that now in that race that kind definitely I'm but right now like I'm looking like in this very night like I'm thinking what might have happened would be that will as usual might have only controlled by like might have gotten controlled by like the monster and like will might have created like the bottle and might have poured up from beneath like the wasted outside of the control but at the time like to that the monster controlling the liquid it's like surprise this time like another when that cat at like Dustin's phone might have been with it, might have entered that waste bin at that point of right scenario that I'm looking at. So like Dustin right now knows things like visibly seeing like that can violently shaking like and something like that might have been like that might have been like will being controlled by the monster like from within like the bottom like there will might have created like a portal and from there like will while being controlled by the monster might have attacked like the cat uh belong to like Dustin's mother and might have taken the life of that cat and like right before like Dustin had opened that basement like and like Bill might have taken the life of that cat and like Bill might have like left through that portal and that portal might have quickly closed that right. Might have been what might have happened to like while Dustin had basically opened like the basement like all the might have been like the badly injured like dead body of like mother's like their cat but that is definitely my brain principle. Like Dustin will be right now by hiding like you know exactly hiding that body like that in like that bag and it would be like trying to like steadily and get that back to the looking phone so that like Dustin could like that absolute fight Dustin could like only inspect as to like what actually happened to that cat. it's definitely my victory ambition. So like this will be what like person would get telling right now, taking my victory ambition, and I'm looking like but still my preparation for like Dustin's plan to like probably fail with like Dustin's mother right now it's like calling Dustin everything Dustin standing in front of his mother but holding that bag like right now it's another his mother to like find out about her cat's possibly having died. It's definitely and being present in that bag is like the scenario that I'm looking at. Also like I'm looking like as like Dustin's mother would be casually interacting with like Dustin and Dustin like Dustin's mother even asking Dustin as to like if Dustin saw her cat anywhere like so like maybe it would be at that point that I'm looking like the scenario to be like from like the back that person would be holding that kind of thing like blood dropping out of that bag at that point in front of like but with mother and that's not shockingly seeing that so like at that point like that would be how like I'm looking like she would be like shockingly finding out about like her favorite cat that it's definitely one of the friends. So like I'm looking up to like only panic and go crazy at that point. And I'm looking like up to like straight away assume that it was like Dustin's room that basically Dustin had basically like gone crazy and basically taken the life of our precious cat. Might be along the line from Dustin like Dustin's mother at that point straight away assuming that it's like the scenario that I'm looking and that way like poor Dustin poor and innocent Dustin getting into kind of like a couple like the scenario that I'm looking at like that person's mother like totally like hopefully taking substance to like to see a doctor and everything is like also like any of the scenario that I'm assuming like again I'm brains. It is like but even the same person right now with like substance mother like cat being alive and being right next to her right now. Like I'm still my those impressions that like the mother would be having like more than one cat. So like I'm looking like it would be like either like the mother would be having like two cats or like even more than two cats. So that I'm looking like it would be like the while this one cat is like right now alive and right next to like the mother there would be it would be that other cat that I'm looking of that belongs to like the mother which should have totally died and would be within that bag that person is holding right now. So definitely and it's like the scenario and right now it's like the since mother like so me finding out about like that yeah that as well right now is definitely the scenario that I'm doing and I'm I guess so like the minimum frame production right now as to like something right now something to like some sort of like a creature from within that flow box that like the things that right now holding that minimum production that like what that creature would be under the like that would be like the tiniest version of like that faceless monster and like even like the faceless monster and scintillating method production would be like a tiny version of that it's like fully mature and fully grown form which would be like the ultimate giant fight of monster form of that the scenario that I'm looking. So I'm looking like what might have happened be like in that the very first time that basically like the based in at like the form I think of that so shaking or something like at that point I'm looking like it might have been like one of uh it might have been basically that will maybe like from within that wasted that possibly like attacking one of like the one of like the new doesn't remember to be having like multiple pet cats so like I'm looking at one of those pet cats might have totally might have entered that waste bin while like I'm looking at will might have totally like entered into like that waste bin as well as like I'm looking at things might have totally put that same thing that basically that was put onto like Will's mouth while that while Joyce as well as like Hopper had found Will in like the parallel world like basically and still according to my book right I'm still putting that thing was that was like put into like Will's mouth back then might have only it might be totally right now causing like how situation look like Will and something like might have caused like basically the monster like raise up in its like to like slowly grow from within will definitely what will be happening right now is definitely not right. So like I'm looking like what will might have done might have been that within from within that the waste bin that outside stuff so like will might have like attack that cat pet cat of like doesn't mother and like will might have also put that like thing onto like that cat's mouth. Exactly, it's a similar kind of like a thing to the cat's mouth. It's definitely what might have happened because like I'm looking like while you will be that controlled by like the most of them within will might also be able to like to even that exactly one with brain so like will while being controlled by the monster might have put some so like a kind of like a thing into that the mouth of that cat and everything like by this time like everything like that monster, that cat might have been presented in that waste in that trap like state where like I'm becoming like right now like I'm looking like that monster might have like probably that might have been growing from within that cat since like cat is like such a small body or like cat has such a small body and like since like cat like such a small container and bring that monster from within that cat might have quickly grown out of like the cat might have been what might have happened like about to say that about the right so like while Dustin had opened like the waist then like what Dustin might have seen might have been the tiniest form like that taste of monster and Dustin might have not been able to even realize or recognize that or connect that tiny monster to like the like tiny form of like the faceless monster. So like I'm like the faceless monster like especially since like the faceless monster looks like so different from like the giant spider like monster and the different like uh when like the faceless monster is in like most tiniest form as soon as it works like when like the faceless monster will be in its like most tiniest form like it would be also like to be extremely difficult different to like the faceless monster remember things so like that might have maybe that what being the reason for like I'm looking like right now like seeing that tiniest form of that Facebook monster, like Dustin might have not been able to like recognize or connect that monster to like the tiny form of like the Facebook monster. So you remember when it's like some reason maybe like that's not the only thing that like he has found some sort of like a cool unrevealed like animal or creature or species. Would be along the lines like Dustin would be like right now straight away assuming and Dustin won't be like king of like wasn't say that like this of this monster having any connection to like that Facebook monster that that had like taken and abducted Bill and everything is like my personal question. So like I'm looking like right now definitely with like Dustin like bringing that box to his room. I'm looking like Dustin only usually keep deciding to like keep that creature as a pet is like the scenario that I'm looking so like that way that Dustin only providing it with like food and everything is like the scenario that I'm looking so like I'm looking maybe like putting it into like a box or like an even bigger box or like a container for like it to live in while at the same time like for it to like remain hidden as well and like it will be like a transparent glass or anything that like the thing will be like keeping that monster as like a pet but like a like keeping it into like a fuse box and like keeping that box somewhere in like the corner of the room and doesn't only feeding it every day and like that way I'm focusing like that tiny monster growing up until like eventually by the time that Dustin would be most likely unsuitable maybe for Dustin to also keep like information about like this like Dustin finding this creature or secret from like even Mike Lucas and Dustin Mike Lucas and Will as well as like Maxine maybe like a secret so like maybe like I'm looking like the first person that Dustin might even maybe I'm looking like it would be just like Maxine alone that like I'm looking like Dustin might be right now feeling so close towards like Maxine that like I'm looking like Dustin maybe even prioritizing Maxine over like Mike Lucas as well as like Will that like I'm looking maybe like Max Dustin stop revealing about this race of that Dustin has found from like waste and only to like Maxine alone. Definitely not thinking about that's also like a positive that I'm doing and that way like this information like and Dustin telling Maxine to like keep it a secret from all the others so like also for some strange reasons also like positive that I'm looking for. So maybe like that way like I'm looking by the time like Mike and Lucas would be like finding out about like Dustin having this like pet creature like by then like I'm looking like by then like I'm looking like by then and by then like I'm looking them all possibly even realizing that this creature would be like a small form tiny form of like that faceless monster would be along by the time like Dustin as well as Mike Lucas and all of them would be like realizing about this like and like by the time they would be like deciding to head back and take the life of that tiny monster that fights and like I'm looking like that monster would have escaped from like the home. It's like dimension scenario that I'm looking at right and I look at it. And that way, like I'm just looking at that point that monster this would be still tiny at that even at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking at. And that tiny monster like wandering around in like the town of Hawkins and I'm looking like that tiny monster like initially feeding on all the similar kind of like a pumpkin or like some sort of like a different farm field um, field and eventually like then monster grows more and more in size while like Mike Lucas and upset. and will all of them would be frantically searching for that monster. They won't be able to like find the monster. While during the time that monster would be like feeding up on all these like fields, then crops in the fields, and then like observing that monster slowly moving on to like smaller animals, feeding on smaller animals, and then like that monster eventually ending up like attacking uh, uh, a human is like in the scenario that I'm saying. So like by then like it will be like too late for like Mike to understand as well as like very it's like in the scenario that I'm in the right time of the language. Yeah, so that the minimum generation right now has got like Dustin only finding just like tiny monster from like the waste and like less doesn't say like the minimum generation that like it will set the road will expect minimum generation. So like what might have happened would be like right now when the generation like since it's like a waste bin like and since like there was like even right now the like that Halloween pumpkin right next to like the front door like the phone like the minimum generation were like the mother might also like pumpkin a lot so, so, like the monster might have while in its like tiny form might like pumpkin a lot as well. Minimum generation so like I'm saying these tiny monsters but for my generation that might have been that uh, when like Joyce and Philip had found Will that thing or over like Will's mouth like at that point that was like that whole process of like really of like the tiny egg like being transferred into that Will's body might have been happening during that point. Certainly not the friend. But like even though like Joyce and Hopper had saved Will and pulled off that thing from like Will's mouth, still so it might have been present from within like Will's body. Definitely when the making but like that might have been what might have happened. So like I'm assuming like right now that those eggs bunch of eggs might have hatched and if there's like those monsters would be like tiny monsters like these exact tiny monsters the same as like the ones that like Martin have right now found like under the like there will be a great number of them with from within like Will's body right now. Certainly my like I'm thinking like what might have happened would be like I'm thinking like will while the and these monsters would be like controlling Will in like the middle of the night and it would be like due to like these monsters like tiny monsters possibly living from within Will might be the precise orders for like Will being able to like see like Will's like vision being like turned into like the temporarily during night time turned into getting turned into like the vision of like some monster and that's why like Will being able during night time will being able to like see such the parallel world from like the real world and all that which would be actually the vision of these tiny monsters that we never train with so like the neighbor would like index that basement of that's like I'm looking like there might have been like pumpkin waste so like I'm looking like Will might have while being controlled by the monster like Will might have eaten like initially that like Will might have eaten all those pumpkins and I'm looking like the and Will might have like while like the monster from within Will might have made kind of like a habit of like not only like basically going around into like the pumpkin fields and basically like eating and while eating like due to like these monsters from within growing within Will like and within, like the poison would be like coming out of like Will's teeth and basically causing like the pumpkins to like get poisoned by Will would be like eating the all those pumpkins, but like all those pumpkins that Will will be eating would be like going straight to that all those like tiny monsters that would be that's like that would definitely putting like Will like I'm gonna eat him all that pumpkin and it would be like the preservation for like Will totally basing upon which was revealed recently and all that definitely not very interesting. So and I was hoping that what might have happened would be like along with like eating all the great number of pumpkins in like the field like I'm current still like due to like all the great number of monsters, tiny monsters possibly being present within Will like everything like these monsters might have split control Will and had to like and might have brought Will to like the wasteland of like substance form and they are like everything like Will might have entered into like that wasteland and I was wondering like uh, Will might have eaten all those pumpkins. So like I'm just then like out of like maybe I'm just going to be most likely through like the liquid waste exactly like how Black Hawk had found that liquid waste in that basically in those fields that he went to like inspect like I'm just like it would be even in that waste then it would be through that waste same kind of like a liquid waste but of like a not that extent of like a quantity like I was thinking like but when after eating the pumpkins in that waste, then like it will be through that liquid waste that I was like these tiny monster might be like indeed Will's body. It's definitely one of the temperature. So like this might be how like and so like I was like then like after like that single tiny monster might have escaped out of like the Will body into that waste bin, that will might have most likely maybe from might have left like left that dustbin, or like might have will might have, while there will be still more like these tiny like monsters from within the body, like they might have like they would be allowing Will to like use powers of like the monster, which will be like through their powers, like Will might have created like a portal from beneath like the wasteland and might have escaped that like the scenario. So like looks like that monster alone that basically being present on that basis at that point is like maybe what might have happened, or like Will might have only after like that after like basically having that monster leave a single monster leave tiny monster leave his body, and like uh, entering to like that waste bin, like at that point that Will might have already jumped out. Will, who might have been still being controlled by like the monster, might have jumped out of like the waste bin and might have ran away. So like my Victoria impression was like this might be how like that tiny monsters might have ended up in like the wasteland of like Dustin. So that's definitely my Victoria impression. So like back when like Hopper was like inspecting like the field, like basically at that point like from like the field where like Hopper had basically so I heard that like this like kind of sound of like some breathing or something, and Hopper shortly or a scarecrow there in like the field, like during that point like I was thinking there might have been like other tiny monsters as well in that field, and it might have been like the voice of like the sound of that tiny monsters that like Hopper might have heard. It's definitely not the different impression, and Hopper might have already assumed that it was like for Hopper or something. It's definitely what might have happened is definitely my friend. So like I'm going through like the fluid based like I'm different like a lot of like tiny monsters might have already escaped out of like Will, and would have already spread to like the real world right now itself. Definitely not the case. And all these monsters would be like eventually growing up in and turning into growing up to eventually reaching like the point of like becoming like faceless monsters, and then like the faceless monsters eventually growing up to like ending up the gigantic size of that of like the spider like monster. It would be like the scenario is like definitely my preferred impression. So my preferred impression right now is definitely that. So like my preferred impression that it wouldn't be just in that pumpkin farm alone, but like right now with like just now recently like hope of having seen like multiple farms with like having like a lot of that food base, like all that farms right now would be already infested by like these tiny monsters. Definitely my preferred impression. So tiny monsters might have for so much through Will already by now, especially in my preferred impression. So yet there would be even more like tiny monsters still within Will, like that would be even growing up more and more into that would be like totally still controlling with day night, especially in my preferred impression. So this might be what's like going on right now with new friends. Okay, so like also like impression and of like the bodies of like the people in like the parallel world, like a bunch of them found in like destroyed kind of like a state, like that would be like most likely due to that definitely that since like in there unlike in Will's case while where like Hopper and Joyce had saved Will from that thing and like being placed onto like Will's mouth and Will being in like a trap situation back then. Like I'm assuming like for every other people in like the parallel world, like for the other people in like, the parallel world, they might have stayed in that, they might have ended up being in that trap state with like absolutely no one come to like help them. So like I'm looking like that thing or their mouth basically, like they might have not been able to like move or escape from that state. And I'm looking like like the X might have has them basically while they were like unmoving and in that trap state, and like the monsters that might have been like the perfect condition for like these baby monsters to like grow. Just remember the vision, though, like that baby monsters might have spent even way more time than they would be right now spending in like Will's body. Like in the case of like those people that might have been affected by the face of monster in like the parallel world, like basically for in their case, like after being put into like a trap like situation by like the face of monsters, like everything, like the baby monsters might have taken their time in that perfect condition. The baby monsters might have taken their time to like grow big enough and until they decide to like leave the body of those trap people. And by then, like I'm looking like definitely that would be like the precise reason for like the dead bodies of like the people in like the parallel world being found in like a destroyed kind of like a state. But like since like when situations like not like that, I'm looking like in the case of Will, like I'm looking at the monsters, since which would be like that absolute perfect condition. Since Will is right now is not in like a after being saved has not been in like a trap kind of like a still situation. So like it won't be like that perfect kind of like a condition for like the monsters to like grow. So like I'm looking at the monsters themselves might be trying to like get out of like Will's body and escape out of Will's body. Uh, would be like the precise situation that would be happening with Will right now, especially when the premium. So to be the present sole reason for like the monster most likely having escaped through like the waste fluid and basically the monster that way like these tiny monsters not still not destroying like Will's body would be like precisely because of this reason that Nima the premium. So like I'm maybe once like all the eggs that will be present within like this body would be like hatching and all these monsters within all those eggs would be like escaping through like the uh, waste fluid like at that point I was thinking like maybe for like such a scenario even happening and basically that way at that point I was thinking all of a sudden like Will would be shocked with like all of us like discomfort and everything instantly being gone. It was like the also like an Avenger puzzle scenario that I was wondering, but like by then like all the eggs would have had and basically it would have spread all those like baby monster all out throughout like the um, all throughout like the town of Hawking without realizing it. This is definitely also like about to that episode for the end of frame. I also like the flip of the frame mentioned right now as for like the baby monster of like Dustin that only hesitating to like reach like the food that Dustin gave it like but like just straight away taking the food once like the lights and in terms of like the light like I'm told at least I was mentioned that like definitely the weakness, the ultimate weakness of these monsters of like the faceless monster as well as the spider monster, like for all of these monsters, like their ultimate weakness would be light and light. So like my brother mentioned that like it would be like number different like to the monsters usually be being symbolically represented as like darkness and basically darkness only being able to be destroyed through that would like basically along such lines like I'm presuming like maybe like the science teacher class as well as like proper like all of them sitting together and like all of them brainstorming and basically eventually ending up with such a solution and I'm like the final showdown fight in which like all these like monsters would be wiped out and destroyed like towards the very end of like the show. And but bring it to be most likely through like that like like even like the giant fight in monsters like even like in that final war like a fight like there was a great number of like faceless monsters as well as like there would be like the monsters will be having like a stage even before like the faceless monsters as well before it's reaching like the maturity of like being like the level of like a faceless monster like it would be having like even a tough form where like it would be still like extremely dangerous and like for against to the event as well. It also definitely may be threatened. So like all these forms of like multiple forms of English monsters, along with like the giant multiple giant fight like monsters, like all of them like only being fought off by like the human from like the real world. And I was like in that fight and that war, like I was definitely in the through life, like I was really like in that war, like I was the top and like, as well as like all the public and everyone will be like having no other choice but would be like actually forced to like fight for their survival to bring down these monsters. It's like any other scenario that I'm looking them being forced to like use all the strength they can get to be able to like destroy and wipe out and eliminate all these like giant monsters and everything. So like I'm thinking like even while like the spider monster was like extremely extremely huge and it's like intimidating, still my was resistance that like even for like the spider monster as well, like it's me an extremely rich bright source of light would be like would like possibly like would be that ultimate weakness for like, even the giant spider like monster would like still weaken like the giant spider like monster. Definitely my good impression. So that like at that point like basically weapon would be like usable and basically would be like easily doing serious damage. It would only have that point like weapons would be able to do serious damage to all these monsters that need to and to even the stand by the ending of the damage. So this is how I'm considering like the final showdown fight like I was been being like a great number of light sources in that war like I'm going the human fighting against these monsters by bringing out a great number of huge light sources and then even like the humans even wielding like weapons containing like light sources like installed onto like the weapons and basically that by pointing that weapon, like they would be also like straight away simultaneously pointing that like right light source as well towards like the monsters, and that would be how like I'm looking like humans would be tackling with the monsters and like weakening with the monsters and like deploying like the monsters one by one is like that ultimate final boss, like they will just scenario that was everything and everything. So like the flavor with emphasis where like the monsters are like afraid of light and the monsters get weakened, weakened in like the presence of light. So like I'm sure these monsters as well would be totally having like telekinesis powers also that never different because like I'm different the initial master monster like might have been totally up to the remember might be like totally 11 like parallel version of 11 like basically the parallel version of Piranha might have experimented on like the due to like experiment going wrong might have turned like the 11th into like that first monster. That's definitely what might have happened, especially my best friend. So like 11 might have first turned into like that the parallel version of 11 might have been like the very first monster. So like now the emergencies are from like all the remaining monsters in like the parallel world, and basically like the monsters that like even like the baby monsters that is here right now even spread through like the human world as well. All will be like eventual descendants of like that first monster, which would be like the that would be especially the parallel version of 11, like basically due to like for a parallel version of fiction going from turning into like the very first monster of the human world. And these monsters, so like I was bring like during that experiment, like the bad version of 11 as well might have gained that while also turned and getting turned into like a monster, like the bad version of 11 might have also gained like telekinesis powers as well. Definitely remember the version. And definitely it would be most likely through like these monsters using their telekinesis powers that they would be destroying all the light. So like it would be just like light sources having like some sort of like a like the monsters presence like affecting like the light source and painting due to especially due to like these monsters like being totally afraid and getting weakened due to like light source like so like I'm different like and that would be so rich for like these monsters would be only even venturing out during night time and into like the real world as well. You can remember that would be because like nighttime that darkness of like nighttime would be giving this monster their actual source while like the sunlight of daytime will be like easily weakening these monsters and maybe it will be like making it like even impossible for like these monsters to like even survive. Especially my brother. So like I'm looking like even in like a battle world, I'm looking like in that time like really everyone who had gone to like the battle world from like the real world might have all gone during night time in like the real world. Especially my brother. So like maybe that might be the case with definitely my brother. My brother. So like I'm looking like even like the parallel world, there might be daytime as well as nighttime, and it wouldn't just be always like nighttime in like the parallel world. It's definitely always dark and always nighttime in like the parallel world. It's definitely my opinion, and that's what like even like some monster that had basically even like that monster that basically even showed up into like the form of Mustard as well as like was like sneaking around in like near to like Steve's home and everything, which like Nancy had initially seen and everything. Basically, since that monster was like basically was like seen around like Mudwood multiple times. Like I'm looking like things like Mudwood would be totally and absolutely thick for like which will be preventing any much of like a sunlight from entering that forest, which will be the best reason for like that monster like basically staying around like Mudwood and not like even daring to like come to like the city areas. So this is precisely because of like the sunlight because like the Mudwood forest would be thick and blocking that sunlight that like that monster would be even in like the real world would only be able to like stay hidden and survive in like Mudwood forest alone, like in the shades alone. Certainly, my very impressive. So like I'm looking like even like the bad world, like all these monsters would be like staying hidden in like the forest kind of like area during daytime, and I was like it would be during nighttime that like these monsters will be like venturing out from like the forest and basically would be like wandering through like the city areas and everywhere in like the parallel during uh during night time and basically like by the time like sunrise of like multiple like these monsters or like getting back either to like underground and I'm going like yes like I'm going to bring like this things like this spider like monsters like so extremely giant and huge and definitely it won't be able to like hide within the box. So like it like actually like how like these giant monsters spider like monsters would be surviving and like the battle would be tested by like digging under and going underground and hiding in like the darkness underground. You see how like these giant spider like monsters would be hiding from sunlight during daytime in like the battle. So like I'm saying during nighttime these giant spider like only during nighttime that these giant spider like monsters would be like basically would be appearing from like the underground to like the battlefield. subtext. It's definitely what may be happening is definitely may be variable. So also definitely may be variable since like since like during like the whole trick or treating like basically will had once again had this like this of like the parallel word where like Gills had basically seen like with like set long sets of like lampposts like containing some sort of like a white light. Like I'm saying those like won't be like the usual kind of light that you remember projection. I'm still thinking about projection that like those lampposts and those lights might have definitely that light might have been like might be like totally different and unique like that would be like way tougher. It would be like extremely hard for like even like the monster like the battle bird using the telekinesis power to like destroy it also and that might be created by like the battle version of Piranha. It's definitely also my famous. So like even while I'm referring definitely after that monster in like this monster in like Hawkins Store had in like the past had attacked like Piranha. Back then like the original Piranha might have died, but like the battle version of Piranha might be still alive even to like the very present day. It's definitely my favorite. So like in the parallel world, like another thing is the math version of Piranha would be like desperately like experimenting, desperately hiding somewhere and basically desperately experimenting, doing all sorts of experiments to like basically like bring down like this like all these monsters and eliminate all these monsters and like save the world. It's also like definitely a possibility that I'm doing. Like the parallel version of Piranha might have requested like this experiment. Would be like situation with like the parallel version of Piranha and he would be desperate to like save the parallel world by and to like eliminating all these monsters. So like he was just really searching for ways to like and experimenting in a maybe like an underground like location that would be like hiding and he would be like only secretly experimenting consistently on a consistent daily basis. Trying to figure out a solution to like wipe out like the entire typical monsters and like the parallel ones that remember the premise. And this will be precisely more like towards like his base, like the base like where like runner the parallel runner would be doing all the like experiments and where he will be hiding. It would be towards that location that like all these like great long sets of like this like lamppost which like Will has seen like as like the only light during in that parallel world that Will had seen those great number of like lampposts that would be like created by that parallel version of Brenner and that path would be leading towards like the base of like the parallel version of Brenner in like the parallel version of Never So it could be potential because like the parallel version of Brenner that totally would be like afraid to have like any sort of like help from humans because like he won't be able to like he would need like help to like do a lot of things. So like even though it would be like all the brains would be like that of like Brenner. Even though Brenner would be knowing what to do, like he will be needing like a bunch of helping hands for like to do like all the heavy work and everything for him to like achieve all of this like to for him to like do this stuff in his like experience to destroy all this like monsters in like the battle worlds that we will build. So like basically for anyone any survivors in like the any survivors remaining in like the world to like see these like lamp posts and basically follow the path of like these great lamp posts in like the battle world leading to like Brenner's the battle worlds and Brenner's base might be the perfect intent for like all this great number of lamp posts being like the only light source like right now that basically they have seen in like the battle world during that will that vision during like the operating is definitely my personal impression. So yeah, that's my personal impression. So that's definitely I'm whispering like eventually in like the very distant future I'm whispering like Mike Lucas, Dustin as well as like Will as well as like 11 as well as Hawker as well as Joyce I'm whispering like eventually with like the eventually like the countries are like like the even like the real world like the real world slowly bit by bit day by day like by each day like the real world as well getting seriously affected by like the great number of monsters that would be like spreading through like the real world and growing basically would be like attacking all the humans. So like I'm looking like as things will be getting worse and worse in like the real world. I'm looking uh like basically I'm looking like eventually at some point in like the future like totally by then like I'm looking like Hopper and all of them might be like even finding out about like definitely I'm splitting them with friends to that like in like the parallel world like parallel version of like the people in like the real world would definitely be existing definitely with friends in that way like basically eventually like maybe for 11 or like someone coming up with the idea for them to like basically them considering like that would be like at like a point where like they won't be knowing what to do, how to stop this like whole monster infestation in like the real world and everything. So like to find a solution maybe like I'm looking like one of my like Mike's team or like 11 or someone among them like eventually coming up with the idea to like basically search for like the parallel version of run up in like the parallel world, like the possibility of him being alive and the possibility of maybe him knowing like basically the police can feel like basically put on stop to like for this since he's like he might be like the one that might have created like the very first monster would be along the lines like they were thinking and I was by then like them even figuring out about all this also like about what the dilemma of the fight. So like and by the like I'm maybe like them all figuring out like that basically the very first monster was like the battle version of like 11 had turned into a very good monster. So also actually my premise that like Mike and Christine like Hopper and all of them like basically eventually figuring out about this and that way like them entering into like the battle world in search for like the battle version of Piranha. And that way like them all finding like the battle version of Piranha through the like great number of lampposts in like the battle world is like the eventual scenario that I'm putting them or like totally initially even though Joyce and all of them would be like on seeing like the runner and like even though it would be like not the very same runner even though it would be like battle version of runner like even though they would all be like extremely disliking runner straight away that kind of still them eventually like teaming up with like the battle version of runner and it could be through like the battle version of runner's help that I'm putting like the entirety of like the human world basically the humans in like the remain surviving humans in like the human world like all those rich life source like will be like launching their war against the monsters and basically could be finally succeeding in like finding their way into like finally succeeding in like saving like the human world uh from like the monsters and that way preventing like the human world as well ending up into becoming like the parallel world is like I would very much also, the demand of infection right now has got like this like baby monster that's basically eruption without realizing how depth as it's like I'm believing this baby monster will be like growing hugely fast. It's a new so like I'm hoping within just like a week, like I'm looking like Dustin's already noticing like that monster looking totally that baby monster looking totally different and grown and not only in size but also like in like design or like appearance as well like it looks totally different from how it looked when like and in terms of strength as well since when like the has was founded in that way so it's just like the scenario that I'm looking for and I'm looking and when like that would be like one main factor in like the humans in like the parallel world like they the majority of them getting wiped out and they really look like these monsters even rolling over like the parallel world basically like the parallel world being followed by darkness and all that like basically all this happening like for all to happen like at least this might have been one major critical factor so fact that like I'm the like these monsters would be like this baby monster would be growing up so quickly and fast at like an extremely fast pace as well as like them not only growing up but like them also like spreading their population as well would be like all happening at like a very rapid and fast pace and this might be like a he does factor in like the majority of the humans like the battle birds getting wiped out and it being a role battle bird being rolled over by just definitely another thing. Oh, that's like even the Korean percent right now is definitely for like without much created at all like I'm looking at like this baby pet baby modes of like trust and like without much created at all like taking the life of like that pet of something and then like without much created taking the life of like the pet cat of like the mother as well like there is scenarios that I'm looking at so like I'm hearing one day like Dustin totally finding like the his like pet will like only its shell lying on the floor and it will like happen constantly finding it's like pet turtle ending up that uh but like I'm just bring at that point like Dustin won't be like suspecting that baby monster at that point is like the scenario that happened. But like I'm looking like maybe eventually it will be after like Dustin's like uh mother's like pet cat as well will be like found that like it will be maybe at that only at that point that like Dustin will be starting to like suspect like the his like pet baby monster like the scenario that I'm looking and by then it would have grown to a certain extent like the scenario that I'm looking but like I'm looking maybe it would be like after like the death of like the things mother's like pet cat uh that like was like Dustin totally feeling that was feeling and while Dustin will be totally like going up to his room to like check uh to totally check up on that they just like pet monster at that point by then like maybe like the monster would have also escaped from like the phone. So also like another positive design in the super again and Korean version. So it's like the minimum Korean version right now is just like basically for placing that on to like that box and basically has to be moving and like seeing like even like hopper being shocked like the Korean version right now is that maybe like Hopper's act of like placing that Hopper onto like the box after like saving when might have been like basically Hopper maybe like that and might have been the only thing that like 11 has side, and so like it might be like Hopper's way of like symbolically like placing like placing flowers into like symbolically as like placing flowers onto like the person's like grave like like with like absolute respect like how like paying respect to that 11 because like how might have only thought that like until that point that 11 had died of the energy. So like since like I'm looking after like supermarket instead like that symbol like where like anyone had shown that wobbles like and like like learning about that like Hopper might have assumed that basically wobble was like anyone's like favorite food. So like I'm looking it might be because of that like I'm looking at it might have been like a symbol of symbolic manner from like Hopper from Hopper's point of view as like placing flowers in like anyone's grave might have been like along the lines like Hopper placing that bottle onto that box. It's definitely what might happen. So, so like I'm wondering like basically so like I was wondering when Hopper had seen 11 at that point. It might be only at that point that Hopper might have realized that 11 is alive. Definitely not the same person. Also definitely not the same person right now that Hopper right now in that snow, snowy form like basically seeing 11 and being shocked and yet like 11 having like this like snow costume like basically to give warmth during that snow like 11 wearing that costume like I'm looking that might how 11 might have gotten that like I'm looking definitely it won't be like Hopper giving that to like 11 definitely I'm still thinking about thinking that it might be only at that point that Hopper might have even realized that 11 is like alive. It could be so like as for like how exactly 11 might have gotten that snow costume like a warm snow costume or jacket or something like basically as like how 11 might have gotten that like, something like maybe it might be during like someone might have wandered into that forest and basically at that point like I'm looking like 11 might have either stealthily and but like after like running away from like Mike's home that sense as like Brenner's team members like chased after like 11 five were like chasing after like 11 and while 11 was like hiding beneath that giant tree from all those people like I'm looking like since then like 11 might have stayed hidden in that boss the criminal branch. That might be maybe like money for the criminal branch. So like then might have stayed here and there. And I'm looking like Hopper even placing the box and like the water in that very same Northwood forest might have been what might have happened. It might be also due to like Hopper through his like interaction with like Mike Lucas and Dustin like basically Hopper might have acted like figured out like about like how much of like a bond of friendship like they had with like 11 and so like since like through them like Hopper might have also learned that maybe they had first found 11 first seen 11 at like Northwood forest. So like I'm wondering in memory of that as well like Hopper might have placed that um place that like water onto that box at like multiple spots might have been like what might have happened. So like this house is within like the plot where like 11 is right now, even to the person is like staying in that house as well will be like deep within like multiple spots is also the neighborhood right. And still the neighborhood mention that like that house would be like kind of a getaway like kind of like a location for like Hopper as well as like his first some best friend Benny to like basically escape from all their stress of like their daily life to basically for them like actually chill. Like I'm looking like they might have created like those like house in like basically deep in like Northwood or like near the river. So like I'm looking like uh especially since like Benny is now more like a like overnighter stay ready that like really like hide 11 there in that house deep within like Northwood Forest. So like Hopper might have done that on that very day that after like placing that waffle onto the box like seeing 11 and at that point Hopper was really talking and realizing that 11 is like at that very moment like Hopper might have taken 11 to that house deep within like Northern Forest and let 11 share the system during the so like so like my consider impressions that like 11 after like running away from Mike's home and hiding beneath that tree hiding from like Runner's men at that point I'm also like on that night itself like I'm looking like it might have started snowing it's like also like about the weather like idea on that night itself like I'm looking like 11 might have wandered deep into that forest and basically on that night itself, like it might have started like snow, and on that night itself, like I'm looking like might have been when like Hopper might have placed that box onto that box, and like it might have been that right then itself that like 11 might have seen Hopper and Hopper might have taken 11 to that. house deep within like Margot was. All this might have happened on that very night itself. This definitely might have been very instruction right. So like my first impression is that like it might have been on that very night itself, like 11 might have wandered deep into that forest, which might be like the forest and the 11 like intent might have been to like it stay in deep and stay hidden deep within like Margaret forest like, for like a few days until like things would be cooling down and like Brenna's team would be like probably like letting go of the surveillance of like Mike percent of thing like maybe around the lines like 11 might have hope for like at that point for like 11 to like head back to to Michael form and then just like communicate to Mike and basically think of like figure out plans as to like where to stay next and all that like actually this might have been like 11th plan while venturing deep into that forest it's a new information but like I think it might have been that very night itself like like it might have started to like snow heavily and I'm looking like at that point I'm looking like 11 might have already felt cold but like at that point what 11 might have also noticed might have been like this person like entering deep into that forest like basically he might have this person might have been wearing like this jacket that like people wear on the including like snorkeling like basically this warm jacket as well as like this like headgear as well like basically this person might have been wearing while he might have shown up deep into that forest. Yeah, and he might have shown up high up to like hunt animals or like other he might have shown up to like basically maybe collect some sort of like item from like the forest as part of it, like or something like that. So like at that point, like he might at that point might have been when like like 11 might have been seriously freezing. So like I'm looking at that point, like 11 might have straight away 11 like to about and might have taken the life of that person and might have stored his like jacket as well as like headgear. Uh, and like basically that way like 11 might have survived during that extreme hard cold climate until like 11 might have been still struggling in that cold 15 cold so like I'm looking at that point might have been when 11 might have seen that hop up basically like placing that buffer onto that box like the scenario that I'm looking at that might be when like how when and how like hop up and 11 might have seen each other at that point might have been what might have happened secondly another so like my good impressions then like basically 11 actors like basically listening to like Hopper and basically hiding in that house deep within like the process of like a whole year for like a whole year like for 11 even listening to that extent to like Hopper might have to do with like 11 only feeling that absolute gratitude towards like Hopper because like that night while it was like snowing and while 11 might have been all by herself into that deep within that forest even with like the warm jacket and like that warm headgear, like 11 might have been only freezing and might have only felt that like she might have been able to die when like solely due to like focus, she might have been able to like make it to that home, that house deep within like the forest and that way being able to like survive. So like at that point, like since that point, like I'm thinking like 11 might have been feeling so extremely grateful that Sofa uh, showed up during that time, especially in the emergency. So like since then 11 might have been feeling so extremely grateful toward Hopper. That might have been like a huge and major fact. That and on top of that, like Hopper might have also tried to like convince Jack 11 that basically 11 meeting like Mike Luther and Silver would might totally put them in trouble against like Brenner and all that might be also along the lines like Hopper might have tried to convince 11 but like I'm looking like after like mostly I'm looking like after like a month itself like I'm looking like 11 might out totally still want us to like totally meet up with like Mike definitely my percent. Yet like the sole reason for like 11 still totally holding it in and basically still like reluctantly yet like still listening to like for like a whole year and staying in that house for like a whole year. Like this only due to that extreme feeling of gratitude that like 11 might have had deep within her toward pop-ups for like basically saving 11's life while 11 might have been freezing in that spot so by herself definitely and bringing 11 to that house definitely might be very interesting. Okay, so like, but maybe I'm pretty much right now with Black Hopper right now, telling Eleven that like Eleven is going to like see Mike Stone and that like Hopper like Hopper thinks that he's making progress with like the remaining of like Brenner's team members and all that. Like definitely by progress like what Hopper will be actually meaning will be actually that Hopper would be like in the name. I'm still remember the relation that like in the name of the basically taking bill for treatment at like Brenner laboratory. Just need of the doctor Howard like basically through that whole meeting like I'm doing Hopper would be also stealthily like collecting evidence like even though Hopper would be only expecting him to be most likely monitored by like a CCTV while he is in like for another budget. But still I'm doing Hopper that absolute still somehow would be like stealth that absolute stealth would be still collecting evidence that in such an with that absolute precision that basically wouldn't be even quickly visible even through that CCTV monitoring. It's also definitely my other so like Hopper would that absolute steps would be like collecting evidence. Like it would be like the process of Hopper collecting evidence that basically will be going on each time. Like Hopper would along with like Joyce would be taking Bill to like see the doctor Owens at like Ferguson in the laboratory. It's definitely my friend. So like Hopper would be like patiently waiting to have like to be able to like collect enough like properly enough like for to certainly have get that kind of content and confident and satisfied kind of like a confident feeling of like the number of evidence that Hopper will be able to like collect from Berners Energy Laboratory to the point that at that point Hopper will be finally be confident of like making his final move and basically taking and bringing like taking like Brenner's Energy Laboratory and like the remaining survivors of like Brenner's team, like all of them and Owens as well, all of them to like go. This would be like and to get them after and to get them imprisoned like that way like so that like at that point finally like 11 will be at that point finally Hopper will be totally believing that like Hopper will be totally fighting to achieve that and basically Hopper will totally believe that at that point finally Hopper would be able to like at that point finally like 11 or like Jane would be finally able to meet Terry Ives not only like meet Mike but also like 11 will be able to like meet Terry Ives her mother and all that like basically. So basically, this would be what like Hopper will totally planning, and like Hopper will be like totally putting on a fake act, maybe even in front of like 11 as if like basically Hopper like actually trying to like to make to turn things around into like make it being in good terms with like the remaining survivor of like presence and then about it. When in actuality Hopper will be like all Hopper will be doing will be like totally collecting evidence with like each visit of like for those presence and the Hopper will be collecting more and more evidence to eventually bring them all down. It's definitely my personal impression. So like the level of impression right now with like 11 right now being fed of like not being able to like see my for like a whole year and being even more fed up with like Hopper's like promises that Hopper has been breaking like I'm looking right now with like 11 acting aggressively towards like Hopper. I'm looking at 2000 created itself like I'm looking like 11 would be like running away from like Hopper's like the scenario that I'm looking at. So like I was going like feeling the scenario to be like that they are looking right now with like 11 turning more and more aggressive and even being aggressive towards like Hopper as well. And like Hopper right now, definitely, totally we're thinking about like the whole situations with like 11 and everything like Hopper come to the decision to like basically that like things, Hopper totally feeling I think like things are totally going to get worse and 11 might run away if and Hopper will be well fully aware that the series would be taking a certain extent of time before like he would be able to like bring down like the remaining team members. Uh, it's definitely my brain is so like I'm looking like Hopper instead deciding that basically to basically just bring Mike alone to that house where like 11 is like to like tell Mike that basically to not reveal about like 11 being alive to that absolutely not even Mike's other friends like Lucas or Hudson or and that way, like with that intent, I'm for like Hopper totally like going up to like Michael for Monday and basically like Hopper we totally thinking of like keeping it like a surprise from post 11. And so like I'm looking like it always greatly I'm looking like Hopper one day like basically heading over to like Michael so and I was for like Hopper totally like secretly telling to that secretly telling to like Mike that they will about like 11 being alive. So like Mike like I would be like lighting up at that point. So like Mike would be totally excited and happy and joyful and like I'm looking like Hopper would be like totally happy being Mike as well as happy and I'm like Hopper would be like totally would be saying some sort of like an excuse of like or like I'm looking Hopper totally picking up Mike most likely I'm looking like Hopper will be like saying some sort of like an excuse to like Mike's parents. So like I'm looking Hopper will be most likely picking Mike up from his home and I'm looking like Hopper totally taking Mike towards that home towards that house deep within like the forest, and Mike would be totally excited and would be like totally running towards that home, and like while Mike would be opening that door, like like Mike not finding 11 there, like the scenario that I'm doing. And at that point, like Hopper as well be shocked. Because like I'm delivering by then, delivering while Hopper would have by then like left to like actually bring Mike, yet like keep by keeping it like a surprise from 11's like the scenario that I'm delivering. But like by the time like when Hopper would be like leaving that house to get Mike, like I'm delivering by then like I'm delivering 11 will be so signified of that, like 11 deciding to like leave that house where like that very same ghost Halloween costume with Nino Brendan. So like I was like maybe 11 might be, and I was like definitely 11 like won't be having that clarity that basically that would like mostly attract like everyone that's looking towards like 11. I think like 11 walks around with like that Halloween ghost costume on 11. It's also like about the like even though 11 will be knowing about Halloween, like I'm still 11 won't be knowing that basically like walking around in such like a costume to be like drawing everyone's attention towards like 11 is like the scenario that I was doing. So that 11 like without being aware of that like I was doing like 11 like totally leaving like the moment of after like Hopper will be leaving like that house to get Mike, like I was doing like 11 will be like fed up and 11 leaving like Hopper that house while wearing that Halloween those costumes like the scenario that I was doing. So like that way, once like Copper will be bringing Mike to that house, like I'm still not finding 11, and at that point, like Copper being like totally shocked and worried for like 11, and them frantically searching for 11. So like I'm looking at that point, maybe 11 like basically walking around in like the town through like the roadside through the town wearing like this like those Halloween costume. There's also like an eventual possible scenario that I'm considering, and maybe I'm considering that maybe 11 not seeing like Lucas and Dustin, but like I'm talking maybe like Lucas and Dustin from a distance, like them totally uh, seeing this like kid, like a random kid, like wearing this like Halloween costume, like basically like of like a ghost costume, and that would be like 11, and like they will be seeing 11 from a distance, but like Lucas, it will be just Lucas and Dustin alone that will be seeing 11 from a distance, but like them not being able to, even while seeing 11, like them not being able to like recognize it's 11 solely due to like them seeing solely due to like 11 like police covered with that Halloween ghost costume. Like it's like an unusual scenario that I'm looking, and I'm looking like during that time like I'm looking maybe like someone from like some someone like from Hawkins Town like basically fully like 11 at that point. It's also like about 50 that I'm looking for. And like 11 is looking up superpowers, and I'm looking maybe like a bunch of people like maybe that at that point like witnessing like this like mysterious kids wearing like this Halloween costume, or when it's not even Halloween, like having some sort of like superpowers. Like basically that news spreading through the town of Hobbies. It's also like a prophecy that I'm looking, and that way like 11 survival like that as that news would be like spreading through the town of Hobbies. Definitely that way reaching like the ears of like Owens and like the remaining survivors of like Sun's team. It's like the evil scenario that I'm looking in that way. Like was like even though still humble, like even after that incident, I was like proper totally finding 11, and that way like finally proper bringing 11 back to that house, and basically Mike and 11 that way like once again seeing each other finally. But still I'm wondering by then like I was putting that whole ultimate secret of like that secret that like 11 was like alive. They believe that getting leaked to like Brenner's that way getting leaked to like Brenner's team. And Brenner's team like actually once again restarting their search for like 11 to like the eventual situation of like an eventual scenario that I'm looking and my personal impression. And that way like at that point Hopper would be like only worried while having 11 uh, still staying at like that house. It's definitely my return. And also maybe like Hopper deciding to like build a secret base to that house at that point to basically Hopper considering with the possibility that like Brenner's team like maybe entering showing up to that hope deep in like the box, so that even at that point to like basically keep 11 hidden to prevent them from like finding 11 like but like Hopper maybe even building that Hopper even building like maybe like a secret base, underground secret base to that house, and basically telling 11 that basically like anyone other than like of my source of to that house for like 11 to like maybe along the lines of like anyone other than Hopper or like Mike Chopper to that house for like 11 to like basically quickly hide, quickly first check through like the window and basically if it lacks anyone other than Hopper or like Mike for 11 to like quickly uh, hide in that underground place. Like the legal like the scenarios that I'm looking for like how much like that 11 and like so being active in the situation with like for like Hopper and 11 eventually like given the scenarios that I'm looking for. Okay, so like definitely not very emotional right now, but like Joe's like asking Jonathan if like Jonathan could take Will to school. Like I'm looking like right now, like for Jonathan getting so easily and badly because like I'm looking the scenario right now is for like I'm looking like for like Will to like totally fake Bob or even Jonathan or his like 11 brothers Jonathan definitely because like Will right now we're only finding like Jonathan totally unfair while Bob and like so definitely because of that way like I'm Will right now straight away telling Joyce without like in an insensitive manner like but like I'm looking like it would be due to that which like naive example different like might be due to like which naive that's like scenario that I'm Will straight away telling Joyce that basically that he'll go with like Bob and like Jonathan right there, standing right there and hearing that like the scenario that I'm doing. That would be like the take up in Jonathan. And Jonathan would be totally treating us like everything. So that will start to like not find like Jonathan. Uh, have started to like find Jonathan even unfold to the, even more unfold than like even Bob would be along the line or like as like Bob even sold while still seeing like Jonathan as unfold. It could be along the lines like Jonathan at that point will be like okay, feeling or like realizing at that point it's like as like how President brother like feeling and basically all that. Then that like probably basically affects what Jonathan is like the scenario that I'm suffering. So like I'm suffering like definitely for like Bob to like and I was so it would be definitely Bob that would be taking Will to like school and I was like Will were totally initially totally getting along with like Bob was like the scenario that I was in like Will would be totally getting along with like Bob and Will would be like totally finding Bob cool and like would be totally like taking straight away taking a liking towards like Bob and Will is like Will would be totally enjoying the ride to school to like Bob's like the scenario and everything and I was like after Will would be like returning back from school and focusing Will totally telling Joyce as well that basically that Will would be like that he wants to like go to school with that dog every day or maybe something along the lines like Will saying and even that as well I think for Jonathan for the like so but like my the impression that like eventually I'm looking like Will getting that shocking realization kind of like a scenario as to like basically as to like how much uh, genuinely caring like Jonathan as well as Joyce is when compared to Bob would be along the lines of different like for like a scenario to eventually happen where like Will would be having that shocking realization where like I'm looking like eventually like during like one night like I'm looking like Will while being controlled by like the monster like very shortly uh in the middle of the night like Will would be like and Bob would be staying over that night and like Will totally while being controlled by the monster and like Will would be about to like step away step outside his home like about to like Bob totally seeing the in like the middle of the night and basically Bob totally end up with not having a clue and like what's going on with Will like and like Bob totally like asking trying to like interact with the land talking to Will something else like why he's up in like the middle of the night along his land. But like at that point like it won't be like Will at all. Like it will be like Will totally while being fully controlled by the monster. So like at that point I was like that monster totally attacking Bob is like the scenario that I was in. That will be getting controlled by that monster and like will the control will like attacking Bob and causing Bob will like have like extremely serious like poisonous injuries depending on the infection during that attack. It's like the scenario that I'm like so like I'm wondering with that like I'm wondering like will after that attack like will I'm wondering, like maybe running away in like the middle of the night outside from like Will's home like while being controlled by the monsters like the scenario that I'm thinking in. Like at that point I'm wondering like hearing that whole sound of like Bob screaming about like voice of the John getting up and like them they would be like showing up downstairs like them shortly not only finding Bob injured but like them also shortly finding Phil missing. So like I'm looking like at that point like I'm looking like Bob Joyce as well as like Jonathan would be totally worried for Phil. So like I'm sort of like Joyce as well as like Jonathan totally would be like directly straight away rush out to like search for Phil. But like at that point I'm wondering Bob would be like totally screaming for help and so like at that point, maybe I was Jonathan telling Joyce to like basically to get Bob to like the hospital as soon as possible, and that Jonathan would be finding will be around there. So like I was doing extremely reluctantly, like I was doing like Joyce like basically like to clear that like get Bob to like the hospital, and I was doing like by then I was doing like and I was doing like Jonathan not being able to like find Will for the end that night is also like about to that I'm doing, and like I was looking like by the time it will be morning, like I'm looking like there could be or finding Will back at the home. It's like the scenario that I'm looking like Will basically maybe like after like by the time we'll be making it back to his home, like will be back to like north and south without getting without being controlled by the monster at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm looking. Or like I'm looking like Jonathan totally finding Will, like I'm looking in the middle of the night, like I'm looking after like Will would be like throwing even more pumpkin fields or like something or other fields or like after Will would have taken the life like a bunch of animals or something like I'm looking like after that like I'm looking like Jonathan that's like the other opposite that I'm looking while Jonathan is desperately and frantically searching for Will in the middle of the night like I'm looking Jonathan finally finding Will and at that point like Will will be like actually like sitting on the side of like the road on a roadside or some where like all by himself. So like I'm feeling Jonathan only being confused and Jonathan only bringing Will back. So like by then like I'm feeling like the control of like the monster from that night would be like okay over. So like Will would be back to his like normal self and like Will would be still in like a kind of like confused like state. So like that would be when like I'm looking like Jonathan would be finding Will on the roadside or something and Jonathan bring back Will. But like at that point like well, like I'm looking like the very next day, like I'm looking like Bill along with like and at that point I was like along with like Joyce, like maybe Bill as well as Jonathan, maybe like deciding to like meet Bob and like the hospital, or like I'm looking like the very next day itself, like I'm looking like it's or like I'm looking like it will be Jonathan won't be like taking Bill to like the hospital, but like I'm looking like it will be like Joyce that will be like staying as like the vice stand up. So like at that point I'm looking like Bob totally shouting out at like one like Bob would have recorded enough like I'm listening to George totally shouting out about like Will is like crazy and like really Bob would have already heard about like the whole zombie boy name calling and everything. So like I'm looking like Bob as well basically at that point the veteran Bob like basically shouting out to like in an angry manner to Joyce and basically that Will is like a zombie and all that. Everything along the lines like you were saying and basically at that point I was putting Joyce as well totally losing it and at that point like Joyce having that shocking realization that basically that Bob was like definitely a wrong choice as well. Exactly like lonely along the lines like Joyce feeling and with that like I'm just like uh, yeah, like I'm just suffering maybe like that like George totally leaving the hospital or like I'm looking like even then like I'm looking like George totally or like I'm looking like it would be by the time like until like he won't be like I'm looking maybe like Bob not reacting that much until like he literally getting a record from like the hospital but like by the time like uh Bob will be fully recovered like I'm looking at Bob without even saying a word like basically leaving the hospital while like keeping a note like basically and telling the nurse to like give it to like George when she shows up to like the hospital that day. So like I'm looking like that way, like through a note, like Bob telling goodbye to like Joyce and all of them. And like Bob, I'm also considering definitely moving to that city where like he had like earlier had basically asked Joyce as well as Jonathan and Joyce to like basically bring her family and to like live along with him into that and move out to like the city, like basically to that city. I'm looking like Bob at that point would be like leaving without even with just like him leaving a letter of like goodbye and in that letter, I'm also like him calling even calling like in with the half words even like a writing of Will as like Will being crazy or like that Will is like a zombie or something like also like that simple scenario that I'm looking for. I'm not sure. Okay, so like definitely the book section right now with like Dustin so badly wanting to like basically reveal his like food respect monster to like his friends like during like the AV club that I'm but still it's not being possible. That not happening is like the scenario that I'm delivering. Secondly, because like I'm delivering while they would be all meeting up, especially because of like Dustin having even called my team like definitely and on top of that like with like Maxine through Lucas having heard of like Will situation his story and like the connection to like the zombie name calling and everything. So Definitely, my preference is that like especially with like Maxine right now, even looking at Will in like a strange manner, like an indifferent manner, like definitely I'm doing that should like literally show even more during that whole AV club that I'm doing AV club meeting that I'm doing like even before Dustin will be able to like reveal about like him having got this like pet monster creature like however like even before the scene will be able to like reveal that even before that like a fight to like totally breaks an extreme loud shouting and quarrel breaking out between like the friends like the scenario that I'm looking because like definitely Will would be totally disliking the way Maxine will be like looking towards like Will in like an indifferent manner during the whole AV meeting and straight away like Mike will be totally supporting Will and basically like Justin will be totally at that point will be like saying that Maxine is like innocent and like Lucas as well and Lucas will be might be like supporting Maxine is like scenario that everything and that part and turning into like huge problem and then like that straight away like that alien club meeting that straight away like as soon as it will be beginning itself like it will be like ending into like a fight and quarrel and straight away uh, and the friends sitting up for like a while, just like the scenario that I'm saying, it's like the group of that with the group of like Mike as well as Will splitting up from like the group of like Dustin, Lucas, and Maxine, it's like the scenario that I'm doing, and I'm looking like it's taking a while for like Maxine to like realize that the situation to properly be able to like understand the whole situation with like Will and everything, and for the Maxine to like finally stop seeing like Will in like an indifferent manner, like I'm looking like it's totally taking a while, so like I'm looking like and I'm delivering it to be through that Dustin as well as Lucas. Like I'm doing, even though during that AV club meeting, like I'm doing Dustin and Lucas really like not like they supporting Maxine and saying that Maxine is like and like I'm doing eventually them totally realizing that basically Maxine was in fact that seeing like well in like in a different manner. So like I'm doing like calmly and patiently I'm doing like uh Dustin as well as Lucas like totally making Maxine understand like that she's wrong. Or like I'm doing like maybe a more quarrel between like uh, yeah, between like Lucas as well as Dustin as well as Maxine is also like eventually like between like when the things are also like different happening. And that way through that war, like eventually like Maxine finally some like I mean like I realizing that basically what's not for tax that her being able to properly grasp and understand like win situation and everything that eventually is like the scenario that I'm living. And I'm looking at only at that point that Maxine's like the way Maxine even looks at Will in like an indifferent manner, like basically all that looking at only changes only at that point. It's like in the scenario that I was looking and vibration and I was like even before that like I was like totally Dustin would be like the first person that Dustin would be like stone off just like a creature, pet monster creature would be to like Maxine and not even to like Lucas like scenario that I was doing. And I was doing that possibly even like causing like a dispute between like Lucas and Dustin as well. It's also like about that I was doing. But like definitely eventually I was bringing like that pet monster of like Dustin maybe eventually even trying to like attack Maxine as well. It's also like about that I'm doing. And I'm going to be through like the sports situations that I'm looking that Maxine will be able to go through. It's also like a possibility through which like I'm looking like Maxine will be able to finally understand Will situation after. So sort of like my future interested. So that way like I'm feeling the quarrels which I'm also thinking will be what's actually happening during the AV club meeting of like the friends like I'm looking like that resulting in like a split between like the group of like Mike and Vince and like a group of like Lucas, Dustin and Maxine and like that split in their friendship like remaining for a while is like the scenario. But that split and like that quarrel and that fight between them like staying for a while until like it like the scenario that I'm looking of the reference. So there's a like name of the reference right now with like proper right now like on the map like marking all of like the location where like the pumpkin field has been like destroyed and basically for that marking surrounding like a specific location like focus on is figuring that out like I'm figuring that that specific location around which like all the pumpkin field has destroyed might have been definitely will it's definitely one of the temperature. So like right now Hopper will be totally realizing that basically that for the pumpkins, great number of pumpkins being destroyed, like basically all that would might have something to do with like will and like the things that will the issues like all the troubles that will have sent this entire time that they look like feeling a bit like Hopper had refused to like believe this entire time like they believe the possibility of like that actually not being like will being like reduced or having like a nightmare but like the possibility of like what will have been like saying this entire time actually possibly being like actual happenings that would be like and like the difficulties that going on with like when Popper totally coming with such realization is like what I'm looking right now in the impression. And so like my three impressions are like it will be only at that point that like I was looking like Popper totally taking Will seriously at that point. But like the difficulties and the things that Will had said that like he had experienced after like being saved and everything. So like basically so like after like Hopper seeing taking them seriously and like all the things that will said seriously and like Hopper like next straight away like the next thing Hopper and the Spring would be doing will be straight away deciding to like head back to not to like run as a laboratory or not to see Owen but like I'm looking like Hopper right at that point is left straight away deciding to head back to like the house deep within like the woods where 11 is and to talk to 11 and ask 11 if like 11 knows something about like the difficulty that like Will is like facing like they need to talk about it to like 11 might be like Hopper's plan. So like I'm going to spend that time like Hopper might have not talked about it to like the industry of like the past year like that Hopper uh had like basically taken Will to like see the doctor or like even in that past one whole year like I'm going like Hopper might have not talked anything about like Will or like what will say that like difficulties at all. Like offer might have not talked about Will at all, about like anything about connecting to like Will at all to like 11 at all for like the past entire whole year. Like right now, but like offer will be like uh rushing towards like I'm going to scenario like offer rushing towards like to talk to like 11 about like Will difficulties if like 11 know like the code behind it. Like so like and for purpose we also planning to like talk to like 11 about like all the pumpkins all the pumpkins and like the farms as well fields as well being great number of pumpkins being destroyed and everything and like all this like Hopper would want like the credit talk about all this to 11 and to like find out if like 11 knows like what's like the connections with all that and Will and everything the difficulties of Will and everything but like I'm looking right now while Hopper will be making it back to like that house people in like the wood like hoping to like meet 11 like at that point I was like proper not finding 11 there like the scenario that I was doing especially with like 11 just now being so extremely fed up with like Hopper number from like 11 would have totally ran away from that house by the time Hopper would be returning back to that house is like the scenario that I'm really right. So like at that point I'm personally remembering like Hopper like something like on like the area around like that house, like the plot and then like Hopper like basically heading straight over to like Mike's home. Like the scenario that I'm looking like and Hopper like checking around like Mike's home by making some sort of like a false lie of like an excuse like Hopper like maybe even entering Mike's home and like checking like the basement at like Mike's home and basically all that like hoping to like find 11 but like Hopper not finding 11 at that point is like scenario that I'm looking because like I'm looking like 11 will be like totally knowing that basically my during this time would be at school is definitely one friend. So like 11 would be like straight away maybe like while wearing like the Halloween costume like maybe I'm looking like 11 would be like straight away heading over to like Hawkins school or something like that. So like I'm looking like it would be after like searching around through like my home and like the area around like my so that like I was like Hopper might be think that usually so 11 might have like head over to like Mike's just like a Hawkins school. Hopper thinking around this land and like then like Hopper deciding to like basically head over to like Hawkins school. Searching for 11 is like similar scenario that I was bring an friend. And I've also bring maybe for like 11 to like show up to that way show up to like rocket schools while wearing like the Halloween and like those costumes, but like all of them like that way 11 gaining like, the attention of like everyone in like that school and I'm also like Mike, Lucas and Dustin as well would be like totally from a distance from it in like school would be like seeing this like this kid wearing like this like Halloween ghost costume like basically some kid like standing there and like seeing getting bullied like I was like Mike Lucas and Dustin like and maybe even will like seeing that from a distance but still I'm looking like Mike not being able to like even when seeing that like even would be seeing Mike but like Mike would be from a distance would be seeing that kid wearing like that those out costume which like the scenario that I'm looking at yet like Mike won't be able to like recognize 11 as like the scenario that I'm looking so it is that those costume like the scenario that I'm looking so at that point, I was wondering why that 11 in like the first game would be like starting to get bullied by electrification. Like I'm certain like before maybe for like scenario to be like before 11 would be like using her superpowers like even before right before that like a Hopper totally showing up and Hopper totally straight away like seeing like the door of him like straight away realizing it's like 11 and Hopper quickly taking 11 with like him just like the scenario that I'm going to look and I'm considering that like one possibility that I'm looking and so like I'm looking maybe it will be during like the 356 day, like the very anniversary day, anniversary night of like the that's the day since exact 1 year after like 11 had disappeared. It would be maybe like on that very night that like maybe while Mike would be using his like a radio phone even on that night of like the anniversary after like 11 going missing like 11 disappearing like basically maybe it being that night that like 11 will be finally succeeding in her like remote communication from like that home. We can like the power to basically be able to like communicate and reach Mike through like that dark void. Like basically that becoming a success for 11 finally during like the 350 day is like the scenario that I'm looking at. And Mike totally like through that radio phone like for the first time after like a whole year after like 11 disappearing like basically Mike finally hearing 11's voice through that phone. Very cool. Like the scenario that I'm looking at, I'm looking at the scenario to be like 11 trying multiple times on that night, like on the night of like 350 to pay to like through the dark void like reach Mike, but like I'm looking for that attempt like totally failing, and like Mike totally would be like thinking that like its point doesn't really as like Mike would be like putting back the radio phone and it's like Mike would be like walking away from that basement like right then is when I was like was finally able to like connect and reach to like the radio phone of Mike. Basically, Mike probably at that point, while Mike would have given up all of his hope, like at that very last second, and would be walking away from the radio phone at that very last second, like I'm like Mike hearing like 11 voice, like and Mike getting that as a good surprise, and it was very kind of like a surprise, like happening through such a manner, is for like Mike, like the scenario that I'm delivering, and at that point, like Mike probably shocked at the realization that like it's like the things that he was feeling like absolutely for the past year was like absolutely true that 11 is actually alive and really Mike shocked me realizing that at that point like the scenario that I'm delivering I'm for him. It was like a new my reimbursement right now for like a year back when like Hopper had basically brought 11 to that house piece and like the doors like basically at that point like they are being like spider webs as well on the in within like that house as well as like a box with like Sarah written outside of it like I'm looking like that box might that huge box might have contained like everything all the memories connecting to like Sarah like Sarah's favorite songs as well as like her photos as well as everything that Sarah had used back then like that would be all present into that box and like that box being present in that home that like of his granddad used to use like this was like covered by spider webs back then like I'm like it might have been solely due to like Hopper desperately after like Sarah's death like Hopper might have been like so simply traumatized by Sarah's death like I'm like Hopper might have finally maybe it might have been Hopper's thoughts of that change or what Hopper like they really get rid of like all the memories involving like something like Sarah so that like Hopper could finally move on with his life and Black Hopper would be like totally won't be like survive, won't be even survive, won't be able to like survive along the lines. Maybe like the doctor might have known of so like at the point like eventually Hopper might have listened to like at a certain point like Hopper might have totally felt that the doctor what the doctor was saying is the fight and like Hopper might have gotten collected took up like from his home like Hopper might have taken like all the memories connecting to like Sarah's dolls and photos and everything that Sarah used like put it into this box and might have totally like the Hopper might have told maybe Hopper to like burn all those memories, but like Hopper might have actually not been able to like bring himself to like to actually get rid of like all those memories connecting to like Zara because like that might be how much like Hopper might have loved his Zara. So like instead like I'm looking like Hopper to forget about Zara, like I'm looking like Hopper might have took that huge box containing all the memories of Zara and brought it and stored it into this this like home deep within the woods that basically Hopper's granddad used to use like basically which was like totally abandoned at that point like basically Hopper that might be how like what Hopper might have done and that might be how like this box huge box with like the names around it like basically like being present in that abandoned house. So it's definitely Michael's very question So like I'm looking like especially with that box as well as like that box being present there and basically that in that home and basically that in that house and that house itself like basically eventually ending up where like 11 like ended up uh, living for like the past one whole year like basically what that would be like just fate is definitely my good very impressive. But comparing like all that might be just fate being kind to like how definitely my good very impressive. Okay, so like definitely my good very impressive right now with like 11 right now breaking the rules of offer and basically leaving the house right now. Definitely my good resistance right now is for like basically by the time like 11 will be definitely my good 11 right now would be that well I'm fully aware that it will be right now during this time that might would be or like in that pocket school. But like I'm maybe like 11 right now more even it's very motivating to like get towards like my home, but like it like 11 straight away deciding to like go up to like a pocket school like the possibility that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like at that point I was looking like definitely to be during like the AV club period that where like I'm looking like putting like substance like for meeting like while I'm looking like while probably might lose the Dustin as well as Will as well as like Maxine would be like showing up and they would be all sitting together. And it would be like right about to talk like while they would be only beginning to talk like it would be at that point that I was suffering like 11 would be like showing up to like secretly showing up like open school and basically would be like totally what 11 would be seeing would be like Mike along with his friends and Will as well along with like this girl, this new girl Maxine, like basically 11 only seeing a Maxine from a distance along with like Mike and all the others. So like at that point I was like 11 for 11 like shocking feeling misunderstanding like situation and like 11 from a distance like seeing this and like 11 softly singing along the lines of it like so like Mike has totally forgotten maybe like Mike has finally forgotten about like 11 like Mike might have gotten fed up with like not being able to like get communication with like 11 that like Mike as well as all of them might have only not all of them along with all of them like Mike as well finally have forgot of 11 and basically has like replaced 11 with like Maxine this new girl will be along the lines of for 11 at that point seeing Mike and all of them with like Maxine from a distance, like 11, this would be what along the lines like 11 would be like also understanding and thinking is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like that way like I'm looking 11 who will be like going up all the way to like open road to just to like see Mike like I'm looking that 11 like straight away without even saying without even meeting Mike like I'm looking like 11 straight away leaving next thing they angry 11 like straight away without even seeing Mike like leaving Hawkins Road. So like scenario that I'm looking for. So like and that way like I'm looking like 11 getting back to 11 getting back to like that how it's like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like yet like I'm looking there might have definitely been at least the single eyesight that like I'm looking like someone like through the black hole travel of 11 like I'm looking at someone like that being like a single eyesight and so on like 11 getting captured in like one of like the CCTV along the path towards like a hobbit school or something like definitely I'm looking like this black hole journey of 11 that like totally would be like the point like that absolute cover and self of 11 that basically through Hopper have maintained for like the past 1 year. So it's like the scenario that I'm looking like that slowly like the news totally of like the bottom of 11 still being alive like ending up leaking towards like remaining on those like furnace being like the scenario that I'm looking. And I'm looking like yet like I'm looking like by the time like 11 will be getting back to like Hopper's home like I'm looking like 11 will be totally extremely disappointed and with like Mike and I was like 11 will be like totally feeling totally frustrated and angry with like everyone and everything. And I was like by the time like Hopper will be returning back as well, I'm looking like 11 will be like totally retailers with like Hopper as well as like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking yet like I'm looking like 11 totally and at that point I'm looking like 11 totally will be also saying that basically from that night on like Mike won't be even trying to like communicate with like 11 won't be even attempting to like communicate with 11 because of like this new girl Maxine like basically so like Mike has totally forgotten about 11 media around like 11 will straight away assuming like the scenario that I'm looking so that I'm looking like in that very night like I'm looking like 11 not even like using the going through the dark void and trying to like communicate to like 11 not even doing that from that night like scenario that I'm looking but like I'm looking still from that night on like I'm looking like the days after that as well, like I'm looking even not even bothering to like 11 will be really angry and rather than frustrated and 11 will be not even bothering to like go to like the dark void to like communicate with like to attempt to like communicate with Mike, like even not even doing that, but like I'm sorry on the very night of like the anniversary of like one of like the exact 1 year after like 11 had basically been separated from Mike, like I'm like even the at during that night itself as well, I'm also like 11 would be like totally deciding to like basically not at all even bother like going to like the dark void to see if like he could once again like to attempt if he could get connected to it like my like the scenario that I'm seeing. Yet like I'm thinking even though how much like 11 would be just released partly to bring herself to like not go into the dark void like I'm still like I was like eventually 11 would be not be able to like contain uh affection towards like my would be still be very much from within like 11 and available like 11 that post usually resulting in like basically usually like 11 like once again so entering finally like at the number so like my like the on the very night of anniversary like I'm then that night like I'm like my until like 12 o'clock like my would be like repeatedly desperately and like trying to like communicate using like radio concept like each of them failing and like my still not giving up and I'm looking like it would be I'm looking like it would be maybe it would be like almost it would be during like 11:59 that I'm looking like 11 would be like deciding to like once again enter into like the dark finally deciding on the day three to on the night of like the day 3 to 3 so this is night like absolutely like after like 11 and might have been separated like during like 11 night of like that night like maybe like 11 finally deciding to like once again enter into the dark world and maybe it could be at that point that by then like Mike would have tried multiple times and failed that very night itself definitely different that like Mike would be like losing hope and Mike would be leaving like the very owner as Mike would be walking away thinking it's like hopeless. At that point, I was like Mike softly hearing like 11's voice to like the radio conference, like the scenarios that I was running. But like even after that, like I was thinking, like Mike still would be having like getting into trouble with like 11 is like the scenario that I'm talking about. Like even then, like I'm looking at 11 will be still like for a while will be like remaining in that misunderstanding towards like Mike that Mike has only forgotten about 11 and has replaced 11 with like this new girl magazine and all that. Like 11 initially totally was just having Mike. Even after that, communicating and maintaining communication with like Mike is also like living the scenario that I'm doing. But like I was really eventually Mike finding eventually separating in like convincing 11 that like Mike doesn't see Maxine nowhere near like the way Mike sees the way Mike sees it and like he might eventually succeeding in like community like living the scenario that I'm so the training. Okay, so like definitely my ambition right now was like he basically right now like facing off against like Maxine's brother in like basketball game. Like right now but like definitely Steve to definitely like defeat like Maxine's brother's team in like the basketball game right now. Like the scenario that it was against that would be like Steve's triggering like Maxine's brother because like Maxine's brother's like ego would be getting seriously hurt at that point. It's like the scenario that I was against that like like after losing to like maybe like Maxine because of the public only frustrated and updated and then looking like Steve perfectly I'm looking like Steve though he would be like defeating Maxine to the team of like Maxine's brother. Still I'm looking like Steve not to make fun of Maxine's brother or not to like even more Maxine's brother. Yet like I'm looking like Maxine's brother would be like totally uh getting his like ego so up to the point that like Maxine's brother like totally would be like uh so extremely frustrated and triggered that like I'm looking like after the school will be like over like that day. After class will be over that day, I'm looking like Nancy's brother like totally totally sneaking up on like uh on uh Steve and basically Max's brother like totally bullying and like attacking Steve's like the scenario that I'm doing and for Steve getting like seriously and badly injured by Max's brother is like the scenario that I'm doing. And that way like Max's brother like desperately facing out his like frustration on Steve is like the scenario that I'm looking at once again. Okay, so like, but even we understand right now, it's like still, even right now, like maintaining that is like an indifferent toward like Nancy solely due to like the things Nancy said while those friend like, but even with the relation right now that like even though Steve is like immature when compared to like the maturity of like Nancy, while like Jonathan as well as like Nancy are like mature and while at my even the relation that Steve would be like immature when compared to like Nancy. Yet like my brother and so I'm going to predict that Lee Johnson would be able to like understand Nancy way more and way better than Steve would be ever be able to. It's definitely my preference. Yet like my preference is that like Nancy's love for like towards like Steve would be like absolutely true and genuine. It's definitely my impression that like I'm looking like even regardless of like all these fights between like Steve and Nancy, I'm looking like still I'm looking like them sorting it out, and I was looking at the relationship between like Nancy and Steve right now, but I think like would still be continuing on to like went all the way to like the to like multiple seasons as well as like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking like definitely I was impressions that like definitely eventually I'm definitely praying for like Nancy and Jonathan to like end up in the distant future. I'm looking Nancy and Jonathan to like finally end up falling into like a relationship. But like I'm looking like the fact that will be like resulting in that eventually happening in like the future. That sole factor would be definitely feels that if the name as of the Anderson doesn't switching on. So like the game was like at some point in like the future, was like Steve totally sacrificing his life will like basically save Nancy from like the monster, like as like the monster be able to take Nancy's life and like as during that situation, like I'm like even Jonathan as well would be like totally badly injured by the monster and basically, or like I'm looking to be a situation where like Johnson might be taken by the monster or like would be somewhere else. It would be getting split up from like Nancy. It would be like Nancy, Steve, and Johnson once again together like during like the whole task of like delivering down some monster and then like, in between like Johnson getting split up away from like Nancy and Steve and maybe like at that point like eventually like Nancy and Steve being getting attacked by a monster and at that point like to save Nancy like Steve sacrificing his life to take down that monster and that way like Steve saving Nancy and that way like similar kind of like a line with how I'm supposed to like eventually Steve to totally die. The end of time is like the scenario that I'm supposed to occurring and that I'm going to make even though would be like and during that whole time were like one after like Steve said like Nancy will be going through that extreme suffering and like sadness and everything during all that time like I'm going to feel like Johnson that would be that absolute comfort for like Nancy definitely my good impression so like it would be through Johnson that Nancy will be able to finally be able to like bring her get herself out of that extreme suffering of like losing Steve that I'm going to believe that leading to in like the future leading to that leading to like Nancy and Jonathan falling into like a relationship. This is like anything to scenario that I'm looking and I'm looking version. Okay, so like my version right now with like Mike right now noticing something moving from the thing like the like creature of like the number something like what would be that would be like moving from the thing dark like and because like that would be like move like the like half just definitely on the frame which is like so for price like I'm like maybe like that would be like in its like base state would be having like a huge minimum frame so huge size just a minimum frame so that might be what it would be moving and I would like even like specifically my prevention that that would be what eventually grows up this creature would be what eventually grows up to becoming like the faceless monster and basically eventually the faceless monster growing up to like exaggerating like the size of like the giant spider like monster would be like the scenario like my impression so like it would be like situation definitely my prevention so like I'm looking like definitely this like thing that like my right now notice is like moving from within like the way we want to stuff like it will be that huge fights up that this monster will be having a development that will be like the monster's ultimate weakness like it was like not to like take the life of these monsters like I'm talking like I'm looking like they maybe like pointing like aiming the weapon at like basically at their giant size up might be like the key to like basically like quickly get taking out all these monsters is also like about that about like using light simultaneously like using like huge sources of light simultaneously along with like uh aiming like the weapon towards like that half region area of like even like the giant size spider like monster would be able to like bring down and take out like the giant spider like monsters with like substance and precision. It's definitely might be like the game definitely my percent right now. Okay, so like definitely number 3% right now with like win alone right now being able to connect the dots and basically win alone realizing that basically like the pet creature dark of like Dustin the possibility of like that being like that very same connected to like the Facebook monsters and everything like really. So definitely even then like will right now keeping that such a crucial and critical information as secret from like my tools and substance as well as like substance like like the reason for like will keeping it like a secret will be most likely because of like the last thing, especially with like all the zombie name calling, like the last thing we would be wanting right now would be to like basically reveal this to like my percent of things so that basically especially since like Will had remembered like basically him vomiting like the fever like the monster like basically Will like would be right now feeling as if like the right now like Will would be like realizing coming to that realization of like the possibility of like each and like dark like monsters like possibly living from within Will is definitely my and that for being the reason for like Will basically like the vomiting that along the lines like will totally feeling would be like realizing right now would have realized right now definitely from the reason yet like I was like the last thing when you would be wanting would be for like Mike and others to like to create will like even more like an in different like a split options and Maxine as well as Lucas to like really rethink even more differently. And Ambassador Bill might be sharing the possibility of like still only right now only having that comfort with like Mike alone. So like even if Mike as well like it will reveal to like Mike, then like the possibility of Mike as well like treating Will in different ways would be like so much of like a worst case would be like of like a scenario that like with the last thing will be wanting in his life right now, especially in the training. So totally is good the reason I'm like will totally keeping this like a quick response Mike, Lucas, and Dustin and all of them were like I was like been deciding to like been planning in his mind to like definitely steadily without Dustin finding out to take the life of Dark. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. Like Will will be like up from this point on starting to like plan that strategy, especially when we play with it. And I was like for Will I was like or definitely after like this very day of like school, like I was like and like the internet next appointment to like meet the Dr. Owen would be like on that very day, definitely my premise. So like I'm looking like, but like I'm looking like offer not a company will enjoy this time for like the current appointment, which will be like taking on this very day. Definitely my premise. Because like I'm looking like in the case of like offer, like I'm looking by the like offer, possibly having getting would be like figuring out um, about like. About like 11 like basically like leaving breaking the rules and leaving like the house like the scenario that I'm looking for, like properly frantically searching for 11 is like the scenario that I'm looking and that way like Hopper not being able to like accompany Joyce by Joyce would be taking them uh to parental laboratory to see like the doctor Owens at like parental laboratory. This time alone is definitely not then this might be like the only single time that Hopper might have not accompanied like Joyce to the while taking will to see that of province in like Renaissance and level specifically when the connection so like I'm not that way like I'm like while Joyce will be taking will to that Dr. Owen Chambers at that point like Will might not even want like to reveal about he will be extremely insecure about it that like Will might not even want to like reveal it to like even Will might not even want like his mother like Joyce either to like find out about the possibility of like these like monsters like growing within Will and basically another thing which would be like totally innocently like trusting like Dr. Owens as like this like savior as like basically that would be like saving and curing. Because like that like I'm like we're totally seeing like Owens alone as like the only person that will be able to like save in this situation that will listen without like having anyone find out about like the situation because like means like the movie is declaring like the possibility and we're just only having the feeling that basically a bunch of stuff or like another stuff would be like basically growing from the same bill to get online will be peering and citizens that will also have like a high IQ and the citizens that will has been losing a pound of weight as well recently like will maybe come thinking of it all of that and connecting the dots and maybe even coming to the conclusion that basically this monster might be growing from within will and basically might be eating all the foods that will be eating and that might be the reason for like um uh, eating a good quantity of like the food that we will be eating and maybe that might be like due to like the reason for like will losing weight and all that we also like we will be feeling so like I'm will might just be the try to have clarity on this like situation with will and I'm just like for that like I'm just like will totally like wanting to have like a private talk with like of the with like the doctor when it's like the scenario that I'm doing. So like after like Will telling his like not of choice to like that basically he wants the private talk with like Owen. So like I'm gonna be like at that point Joyce would be like not start agreeing to that, but like I'm looking at that point like Owen somehow managing to like convince Joyce to like to basically step away for a bit until and for like and I was like Owens totally tricking Joyce by telling somehow with like a convincing manner that person putting Owens for totally putting on a fake actor to like in that and that way Owens like tricking like Will's mother and convincing Will's mother and telling her that basically whatever Will says like he would stealthily secretly tell that to like so Joyce would be a long time in telling Joyce and I was like Joyce extremely reluctantly agreeing to Will's wishes and like during that private talk between like Will and Owens like Will totally revealing everything about like him even seeing that about even dark as well and like Will would most likely revealing to Owens like the scenario that I'm looking. So through Owens like runners like entire sea of like runners like remaining people in like runners laboratory like all of them like basically through Owens like finding out about like basically just like uh, along the lines of something at that point, them possibly come to the conclusion that basically that of like a bunch of like these monsters like around within Will and basically uh and but by then like by now like when I team might be even aware of like all these great number of pumpkins like basically getting destroyed in all these farms and everything. So like I'm them furnace remaining thing like and Owen like basically being able to connect the dots and like then come to the conclusion that basically through Will like the these monsters might be spreading all through like the sound of Hawkins. Along such lines, like them come to the conclusion, it's like one possibility that I'm looking, or like I'm looking like them not having that as a clarity even still. So like I'm looking like will still I'm looking would be telling them about like this like monster dark and then that will had seen that day with one of his friends Dustin and basically like will suspecting like the possibility of like that monster having to do with like connection to like the faceless monster and everything. And Will shortly maybe seeking help to, for and innocent Will like I'm looking at that one maybe even seeking the help of like Owens to like basically to like stealthily get rid of like that monster in the possession of like something because like Will would tell me that if you have the possibility of like that monster like uh trying to take something's life and along the line climb the Will would be seeking the help like Owens so like at that point I was unexpectedly Owens and the team would be seeing this as like a great opportunity to like basically capture and experiment on that monster and turn that monster into like uh, the ultimate weapon that will be listening to their intent as well through 11 was to like create the ultimate weapon like I'm looking like still Owen might have not changed in that goal so like I'm looking like Owen and this team like at that point planning on basically capturing like capturing that monster dark from substance and basically to like basically experiment on that monster to basically turn that monster into like an ultimate weapon that will be like to make like every command of like for another remaining surviving thing and basically on like maybe along the lines they would be like planning and setting up their new board at that point like the scenario that I'm thinking and definitely like Owens right now and this team like William will like them with telling while they will in the name of creating like they will be like patiently waiting for like this and I'm also maybe like Owen and his like team would be like and the team would be like only thing that maybe like of the that will would be like slowly turning into like this monster like eventually which will be like totally fully turning into like this monster only along the lines like they would be thinking but like I'm like them not being aware of like basically that it would be definitely it would definitely prove well that basically that in that basement outside of like the control like basically that might have been uh, escaped out of like Will's body. It's definitely what might happen. Definitely going to so like I was like even after like so like I was like Owens and his team not being able to figure that out and I was like Owens and his team that maybe that thing along the lines of like basically so that the monster have somehow spread to like they would think that maybe like the monster have somehow spread its like babies as well to like the real world as well and thinking along this lines or like I'm going to bring like either that or like I'm going to bring them totally not still not having a clarity as to like how Dustin might have that how that monster of that might have ended up in like the basement of Dustin's phone. And like them only focused on like not finding out the causation, but like them only focused on like uh them totally not focusing on like how that baby monster that ended up in that waste bin, but like them only focusing on that basically experimenting on that monster stuff and basically turning into their ultimate weapon. And basically that's like the other possible scenario that I'm looking at. In the case of Black Hopper and Black Hopper, definitely would be frantically searching for 11, and I'm like Hopper will be talking about all of this to like all of the situations once like after like finding 11. I'm going to Hopper to like find 11 and see if they get 11 back. And I was like even after that I was like Hopper would be telling 11 about like the situation with Will and everything. But like I'm looking like even then I'm looking like even though and I'm looking like 11 might know certain information as to like what might be going on, and I was maybe through 11 like I'm looking like Hopper might be finding out that basically like the policy of like the monster what is growing from within Will might be what's happening to Will, and also it's like I'm looking like maybe 11 revealing to Hopper is also like a possibility that I'm or like I'm looking like 11 basically or like I'm like even totally from that one on using like entering into the dark void to like observe will specifically according to like Hopper system. So like so that like through that way through 11 like Hopper will be able to like find out everything precisely that's like going on in like Will's life, and all the each and every single experience and disturbing experience that like Will is going through like every day for like Hopper to be able to like precisely understand what's going on through 11 that so that like through 11 like basically you don't be able to like understand and tell how far like what's going on with like actually going on with Bill and everything. It's also like a possibility that I'm considering. So definitely I'm afraid still even then like I'm considering no matter what like or no matter what the details that like even if they're revealing like Hopper definitely would be keeping all of that a secret from Bill. And would be like totally putting on a fake act in front of Will as well as Joyce as like nothing's wrong with like this scenario that I'm talking because like the last thing Hopper would be wanting to right now would be to like basically to scare Will, especially not the person to scare Will would be like the last thing that Hopper would be wanting to do. So like I'm doing Hopper like basically doing all of it in private investigation while uh, connecting to like Will and basically to get like I'm doing like, keeping it strictly hidden from like Will as well as like Joyce as well, like in the scenario that I'm doing and I'm doing. So like basically I put the information to bring broadly for the scenario to be for it to be through during like build like appointment with like the doctor Owens that I'm going like Owens and his like remaining team would be like would be even finding out about like this like creature stuff and will seeking help from them to like basically take the life of Dark, but like I was in the creature Dark, but like I'm by the time like Owens and this team would be showing up to like Dustin's home to like basically to take away darks and experiment with the intent to like experiment on stuff like but by the time that they will be making it to like the film like about like what they would be seeing would be like most likely at that point like Dustin might not be present in like performance like during that time like scenario that but like while they will be like showing up like Dustin's home and like we'll be checking Dustin's room like at that point I was like I'm totally finding like that glass tank in which like Dustin was like keeping dark like I'm doing that glass tank like totally that glass being destroyed and like that creature totally missing. It's like the scenario that I'm doing that way like I was doing like um Dustin and all of them like having absolutely and Owens and his team and Dustin and all of them having absolutely no idea as to like where that would have escaped. It's like even the scenario that I'm putting in the impression. Also, I'm considering maybe for like a remote possible scenario where like I was wondering like totally due to like Dustin take good care of like this like pet stuff, even though that creature I'm wondering would be definitely be like the baby version of like the faceless monster. Like I'm wondering still I'm wondering that eventually having like the creature that is eventually having like ending up having like a major role to play in like the human like fight against these monsters, which would be eventually happening in the scenario that I'm while I'm like eventually start surviving to all the way to like the point of reaching the point of like becoming like a faceless monster and eventually even surviving to the point of like eventually becoming like reaching like the point of full growth of reaching like the point of becoming like the giant spider like monster. But like on the entire time like Dustin would be like and considering at some point like that escaping to the parallel world of Willis like the scenario that I'm doing and maybe like that will be growing up and reaching like the size of like the spider monster in like the parallel world is also the female the princess. So like it's entire time like Dustin like as well would be like growing up, and I was like Dustin not having any towards like where Dark would have escaped and all that. But like I was like initially in the distant future, like I'm thinking mid war, like or like mid battle, or like in the middle of like a war against these monsters, and super like maybe that Dustin totally with meeting like running into Dark in like as like a giant, and by then just Dark would be like a giant spider. So like Dustin totally run and Mike and all of them like they're running into like the scenario that I'm living. But like neither one of them, none of them would be able to like recognize that. So like they will be thinking that they will be about to die by the hands of like by they will be about to die by this like giant spider like monster. But like at that point I'm about to like right before like monster will be able to take like the pin and all of that like at that very last second I was looking like the monster would be recognized like Dustin's face, and basically at that point like that mods are not taking their life, and at that point I was like Dustin totally getting the feeling totally recognizing that like that monster is actually dark. It's like scenario that I'm doing, and that way like I'm doing Dustin totally like the monster dark totally listening to like Dustin, and that way Dustin like totally controlling dark and easily using dark to like basically the giant spider like monster dark at that point like fighting alongside like the human against like the other giant spider like multiple giant spider like monsters and or in like the parallel world or like the real world like can into possible scenarios that I'm about to talking and about to okay, so like the film of three question right now, that like in Bob right now telling Joyce as to like basically how he could like Bob could like totally relate to Will, due to like Will right now getting bullied and basically like how Bob as well had gotten bullied during his school days, and then in the film of three mentions that like back during like the school days like like Bob as well as like Joyce as well as like Hopper might have been definitely classmates, definitely maybe very much, and then back then I was like Hopper like back then Hopper was dating George like and back then like Bob might have been extremely jealous of like Hopper. I definitely remember twins. And back then like I'm like the school days like Hopper might have been like the person that might have bullied Bob is also definitely remember the image. So like right now for Bob like basically Bob will be basically within Bob like there will be like a slight set of villains that would be like that it's definitely very much beneficial like, because like Bob would be totally enjoying like basically seeing Hopper all alone, living life all alone while like basically Bob gets to like basically live with like Joyce, like basically the person that was like Hopper was dating back during like their school days. Maybe along the lines like Bob was totally saying is definitely one of the which definitely one of the which so like definitely deep down within like Bob's mind like there will be that villainous kind of thing but like Bob would be like right now really enjoying that Hopper like basically losing like family and being all alone. It's definitely also like about pretty like I'm surrender. So like the name of the train versions are like backstory like the school types of like dog as well as like Hopper as well as like Joyce. Like I'm putting like while they might have only been classmates like back then like I'm putting like for Hopper as well as Bob back then like they might have as well as like Joyce like Joyce and Hopper might have only had like infatuation towards each other. And as well as like Bob as well, what Bob as well might have had towards like Joyce might have been only an infatuation, certainly also relative. So like even to the present time also like that very same Bob might have not grown out of the definitely remembering. Like Bob often mentioning how he gets to date Joyce by like really definitely remembering like back during the school days like I'm Joyce might have been like the most popular uh, girl in like the school, definitely remember Emerson and Hopper as well might have been like the most popular guy like who definitely remember and Bob might have been like totally extremely jealous of Hopper, definitely remember Emerson. So and like I'm also like definitely even and I'm also like Bob might have definitely while Hopper might have only grown out of it like I'm also like Bob might have definitely not grown out of it. So like even to the present like I'm also like Bob would be still within Bob's mind like Bob would be still that very young kid who didn't grow up. Just definitely one of the members and still would be like right now I'm the different like even like Bob's like love towards like Joyce would be like not true love and it would more be like who genuine love. It's definitely one of the things. So we only like Bob's like infatuations towards like Joyce that would be like even to the person that like Bob would be having towards Joyce. But like I'm just suffering in the case of like Hopper might not only grew up and matured to the point that I'm doing in the present, like definitely Hopper will be feeling having that genuine love and empathetic kind of like a love towards like Joyce, especially my three impression, which like Hopper might have maybe would be like insecure about like revealing to Joyce. It's also like about that everything. As like time passed, like I'm looking at both Joyce as well as Hopper might have eventually became insecure. That's definitely, especially I'm looking like the like Hopper, with Joyce having witnessed like the extreme like hard work that Hopper had put into as that determination and all that hard work, that desperation that basically Hopper had of that effort that Hopper had put into like to save Will and like Joyce and like I'm doing like through seeing witnessing that itself, like I'm doing like and spending time together like during their whole quest to like find Will itself, like I'm doing like Hopper as well as Joyce might have bonded to the point of like them both like genuinely wanting to be together, supplement of everything. Yet like I'm doing like to me it might be solely due to like the insecurities within like Hopper as well as Joyce, which might have been formed in like the presence that might have resulted in like neither Joyce nor Hopper being able to like express like the true feelings at that point of like genuine love, which might have been what is more certainly my premise. And that like I'm doing it might be during then that I'm like after Joyce had saved Will, like I'm like and while like this whole like situation with like Amazon like even with like voices during like the whole missing of Will and everything, like Amazon like Bob might have noticed like Joyce's whole situation during like the whole missing of Will and everything. So like expectations like Bob hadn't shown up to like easily comfort Joyce actually during like the situation, like during like the everything was happening while Bill had gone missing, and while Joyce was struggling and going through all that struggles and suffering, like since like during then like Bob hadn't showed up, like and was like definitely during all that time it was like Hopper alone that was like a pillar of strength for like Joyce and her family. Definitely I was like even back then like Bob might have definitely been present in like and living in like the town of August, and Bob might have been observing all this situation going on with like Joyce's life and everything. So like I'm wondering like Bob might have been patiently waiting for the right opportunity for him to like basically to make a move on Joyce, might have been what might have happened. Like I was remembering. So like I'm wondering like after Joyce Hopper has done all the hard work and they really finally saved and brought back Will and saved Will. Like at that point, I was like Bob might have comfortably decided to like make this move on Joyce, and I was like Joyce who might have been like feeling so extremely lonely after like basically like after like about lonely see like, and since then I'm looking for a while for a long while like I'm looking like Joyce might have been living might have been feeling lonely. So like I'm looking when Bob at that point after saving Will, when Joyce was totally absolutely happy, like at that point when Bob might have made this move on Joyce, like I'm looking Joyce might have totally uh, saw that might have only when like as it was like a right thing to do to like basically to state Bob might have been what might have happened to the might have been the impression. So like my sister impressions were like even right now to the present like Bob is totally that extreme inferiority complex of like a feeling that Bob might have had towards like Bob as well as Joy, even all the way back from sports, which Bob might have not been able to grow out of like even to the present like Bob would be having that complex and considering like that might be the reason for Bob like basically even making this move and dating and trying to form a family with like George is definitely one of the things like from Bob's point of view to be probably to be like him totally finally like surpassing Hopper and basically finally being able to like achieve that unfulfilled wish that we might have had since like so they of like basically wanting to like stay like Joyce by definitely my concern emerge. So it's like definitely even to the person like basically this like affection that basically Bob is showing towards like Joyce would be only an infatuation, while in the case of Hopper like it would be like that genuine empathetic true affection towards like Joyce that like Hopper we had to Joyce because my friends and I'm like that how Joyce to like eventually like through various incidents like I'm like George eventually like or like I'm through a single incident, and that single incident would be like basically will while eventually would once again be to control like with the monster taking control of Will like during the night time like during one night like Will totally attacking Bob and like Bob getting badly injured. So like at that point while Bob will be like rushed to the hospital like I'm like at that point Bob, who right now talks about how he feels a lot of connection to like Will and everything. Like I'm like this very same Bob, like I'm trying to true self coming out of like Bob. So at that point, like totally Bob himself calling Will a zombie. At that point, like the scenario that I'm doing. Maybe I'm looking at that point, like Joyce seems so extremely enraged with like Bob that like Joyce maybe he is slapping Bob and like Joyce totally leaving uh, Bob for good. It's like the scenario that I'm or like I'm looking after that incident like Bob totally without even saying a word, like leaving a note where like in that note like I'm like he would be like writing of like a will as like a zombie and everything and basically Bob probably escaping and leaving to like place in like the city. Like the scenario that I'm going to be either through one of these two possibilities that I'm looking like to be shocked in the and painfully realizing that basically Bob was like only uh, was like a total fake. It's like an just scenario that I was living, and that would be how eventually once again like Joyce feeling lonely, and I was like once again that was like the whole monster situation and everything once again spiraling out of control, and basically that eventually bringing Hopper and Joyce once again together, and with like the with Will having all this like situation going on with him as well, like that once again to once again save Will like undergoing like Hopper and Joyce like once again coming closer, and I was thinking it's only at that point that I was like Joyce will be like realizing that through genuine empathetic like affection that within Hopper and terms of like that will be like eventually like within the that will be like ending up with like basically once like Hopper will be that like finally bringing down Brenner like remaining like shutting down like bringing like Brenner's team remaining team members into like court and getting them arrested and getting them in prison and like that way like Brenner's lab would be getting shut down eventually towards like the things like at that point, I was looking like definitely that 11 being finally free to be able to like return back to the real. And at that point, Papa totally feeling lonely once again in his life. Like Papa will be only, it will be like extremely painful for Papa to like basically give back 11 to or even to like the real, like the scenario that and at that point, I was like, Joyce would be definitely would be alongside Papa while Papa would be, while they would be like bringing back 11 or Jane to like the real, like scenario that I'm looking at. But like at that point, like seeing Hopper, like the suffering of Hopper, like I'm looking at that point, I was like Joyce would be probably would be getting finally getting the courage to like to tell Hopper how she truly feels about Hopper, how she wants to be. She wants that Hopper back in her life, and basically along the lines, I'm like maybe it being Joyce that would be telling Hopper about like how she feels about Hopper at that point, and basically that way, like I'm looking at Hopper finally even though Hopper would be having to like give 11 back to like the race, still Hopper getting back a family through like that way Hopper finally being part of like the Byers family with like Hopper. And I was like definitely like at that point like Will as well as Johnson would be totally happy to like have Hopper as like a part of their family. And Joy as well. All of them would be like absolutely happy and they would be content and would be totally that way to like have like Hopper as part of like the family, like doing the scenarios that are making great and building out your number.